Yes, welcome into the camp. Badgers getting ready to take on Middle Tennessee State coming up on Saturday afternoon, a 3 o'clock kick. Favored by 28.5. We'll get to our picks here later in the show. But Jesse, looking forward to another Saturday at Camp Randall because you haven't been it's been a while. Haven't had a Saturday game in a while.
I'm looking forward to the 3 p.m. start, but this is obviously an important game for the Badgers ahead of yet another massive Week 3 showdown against Alabama for Wisconsin to show that it's making strides and making progress. So, look, we cover this team 365 days a year, and there's only 12 opportunities to watch an actual game during the regular season, so it's all good on my end.
Yeah, again, Wisconsin played on a Thursday last time. They played on a Friday the last time we saw them back in November when they played Minnesota on Black Friday. So it's been a while since we've had a Saturday game. That's what I meant. But either way, we do get an opportunity to see them tomorrow, and we're going to dive into that, going to dive into what success looks like for them this time around. Maybe touch on a little bit of the changes to the transfer portal, something we've kind of have talked about, or I should say proposed changes to the transfer portal that came out yesterday. And maybe a few other things as well. Recruiting budgets. We'll at least touch on the On3 story that came out yesterday. So we'll get into that as well. Before we do, a reminder for anybody listening, we do have a YouTube channel. It is the Camp YouTube channel. Just go search it. We have our full shows up there. We have practice interviews with players and coaches whenever those actually do happen. And certainly, what's up?
Smash that subscribe. That's me.
Yeah.
Hit that subscribe button.
Hit that subscribe button. We would appreciate it. We also have a guy who runs the content over at BadgerConnect.com. His name's Jesse Temple, and he's looking for some more people to smash that subscribe button. Is that right? Yeah,
that is correct. We welcome all Badgers fans into the fold.
Even if you're not a Badgers fan, just interested in following Wisconsin football, or Wisconsin basketball, or Wisconsin volleyball, or whatever you're going to cover on a week-to-week basis. That's it, right? You're going to be getting some other stuff, though, too, right? At times.
Yeah, obviously. It's still primarily football, but more basketball, certainly more than I did at the previous place, volleyball and hockey as well. So great time to get on board. Still early in the season. We're 3 months in, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, so please check both of those things out. All right, let's dive into this, and we will talk about what does success look like for the Badgers this week against Middle Tennessee State. Jesse, it's yours to lead off here.
I feel like a broken record because it's to some degree going to be what I said a week ago, but let's face it, this is the weakest opponent on paper and probably on the field that Wisconsin is going to face this season. So this is a game where let's start defensively. Just maintain the high standard that you put forth in week 1. Not that I'm expecting a shutout, though it wouldn't surprise me given what Middle Tennessee did in week 1. Offensively, it's a little bit different because Danny O'Neal is going to start with Billy Edwards Jr. getting hurt. I do think him having a full week to prepare will put him in a better position to succeed. I just think you need to pound the line of scrimmage and dominate an opponent that is much weaker so you can win handily and feel good about yourself going into week 3. That's the short version of what success looks like to me.
Yeah, I would agree. Look, Middle Tennessee State offensively was horrendous. I maybe that's a little bit too strong of a word. It was really
not.
Bad.
It is not too strong of a word. They lost.
So
Go ahead. I was going to
say
they lost 34-14 to Austin Peay, an FCS team. That was Austin Peay's first win against an FBS program since 1987. And Middle Tennessee didn't convert a single third down. And we're not talking about an offense that was just humming along and never got to third down because they were blowing the doors off the other team with 11-yard gains on first or second down. They were atrocious. So it's hard for me to get past that performance and say it's going to be somehow better, especially after what Wisconsin did defensively in week 1.
I was going to say that they went 0 for 12 on third down conversions. We know that Wisconsin held Miami to an 0-9 game last week. Middle Tennessee State's offense, 153 yards total against Austin Peay, which was more than Miami of Ohio, but not exactly the type of numbers that you're expecting against an FCS opponent, especially with a returning quarterback like Middle Tennessee State has, a guy who's thrown for over 3,000 yards in each of the last 2 years. In Nicholas, and I'm not going to get the last name correctly, but it's like Viatato or something like that. Just looking at it, I'm trying to do it phonetically, and it just does not work for me. But either way, irrelevant. He had he threw 2 touchdowns, but he was like 14 for 35. What was it? 15 for 36, 104 yards. That's 2.9 yards per completion and 2 touchdowns. His QBR, Jesse, according to ESPN, and I've never seen a number this low, 3.5. He had a QBR of 3.5.
I think I've seen some lower numbers. He didn't throw a pick. I mean,
3.5. The dude average. I mean, I think he's averaging 2.9 yards per completion.
Yeah, not great. And Middle Tennessee trailed 21-0 in the first half before it even scored. So I know we tend to overreact to week 1, but like if that's all you have on film, that should say a lot about where you're at.
Yeah, and it's not as if they went out and had a great night running the ball either. They ran 22 times for 44 yards. Some of that certainly was sacks. They gave, I think it was like 27 yards in sacks, or negative 27 yards for the 2 quarterbacks that played. But they're not a team that should be able to run the ball in Wisconsin either. So that's another thing. Essentially, it's defensive dominance is what you're looking for from Wisconsin. Continue on with what we saw last week. Get after the quarterback. This is not a guy that's going to get out and run on you. He's going to more likely than not going to sit back there and try and beat you with his arm. And that was not something that Daquan Finn could do. I don't know if Middle Tennessee State, if he can do it. Maybe they take a huge leap here in the second week. Maybe they have they figured everything out this week of practice that did them in against Austin Peay. I think obviously getting down 21-0, you would like to at least have the opportunity to run the ball and be a little bit more even in terms of distribution, whether it's passing and running. But Wisconsin defense should dominate this game, especially coming off what we saw last week. I don't see any reason why they shouldn't, unless Middle Tennessee State's offensive line is able to keep their guys upright. But I don't know the way that Wisconsin rushed the passes last week. I don't know that that's going to be possible.
Right. I think this is a great opportunity for that front 7 to continue to show why it's more versatile. We saw it in week 1. Even if those interior defensive linemen aren't racking up stats, they're doing enough to impact the game, close holes, not allow long runs. And then you can have some of those edge rushers and the inside linebackers we spent all preseason talking about make a lot of those plays. And should you somehow get past that level or throw the deep ball, I feel pretty confident, at least early in the season, with some of those guys in the secondary. I just think this is the type of game. We talked before the season about whether there were any so-called trap games, and you and I thought, no, how can there be when you've got this kind of schedule? This is not a trap game at all, I don't think, but this is the kind of game that should build your confidence so you can go into week 3 feeling like we've got what it takes to be competitive with Alabama. And I know Wisconsin a year ago was 2-0 going into that game, but even at that time, you saw those first 2 and still had some questions about whether it was going to be good enough. And hey, it didn't help that Tyler Van Dyke got hurt in the first series against Alabama. But this is just a real good opportunity for Wisconsin to have a bit of a laugher. And I don't think there have been very many of those other than that stretch against Purdue last season. They're just few and far between of late.
I would say the only laugher was Purdue in the entirety of Luke Fickell's tenure, right?
Yeah, because even if you go back to the opener against Buffalo in year 1, that was closer than expected before the Badgers pulled away. We've talked about last season. So there have not been very many of them. And this is, on paper, a significant mismatch.
Yeah, Middle Tennessee State gave up 5 sacks. They gave up 8 tackles for loss. Wisconsin obviously put pressure. I think they got more pressures on Daquan Finn than actual times getting him on the ground. But they did such a good job of keeping him in the pocket. And when he got out, there was somebody always there to deal with it. So the running of Daquan Finn was really never a factor for Wisconsin. I think he got out of there once or twice. I think his longest game was like 11. Wisconsin defense did exactly what it needed to do last week, and I would expect them to do the exact same this week and maybe get home and actually make some plays. We saw those corner blitzes a couple times where they had him dead to rights and didn't get him on the ground. I don't know that Mr. V here is going to be able to get away from those guys nearly as well as Daquan Finn was able to. But got to finish when you're there. And they didn't always finish when they got to the quarterback. So that's certainly important on the defensive side. Offensively, What are we expecting from Danny O'Neill here?
I'm really intrigued to see what they do here in terms of a game plan. And maybe it's just, okay, we feel like we've got a better front. We're just going to dominate in the run game. But I think they're going to try and take some shots with Danny. I think you've afforded yourself that opportunity in a matchup like this. You've got to be clean and smart and play safe. And Danny talked about this earlier in the week. Yeah, there was the interception on 4th and 3 from the 10 in the end zone. But really, he talked about 2 screen passes that he threw, and those got away from him, or he should have gotten rid of them quicker. Those are the kinds of decisions you just can't have. But I also think with a full week of practice with the ones, it's going to make a difference. Hi, Hank. What's going on, bro?
Sheesh. He's good.
But I mean, more effective running, more explosive plays, really. I mean, there weren't very many to be had against Miami of Ohio for Wisconsin. So those are kind of some of the things I'm looking at.
Yeah, I would agree. The lack of explosive plays certainly stood out against Miami of Ohio. They had the one to Vinny Anthony where he essentially did all the work himself, getting down the sideline. But yeah, in the run game, it wasn't there. I would hope, and we'll talk about it here in a second because the offensive line there's going to be changes there, and that's going to be something to note tomorrow afternoon. But I thought, considering what they were given, thought the running backs did a lot with it, especially as the game went on. Early on, I thought there were some opportunities to cut back that maybe Dylan Jones didn't necessarily see. But as the game went on, him and Darian Dupree ran tougher and threw tackles. And while it did not result in any big plays, a 1 or 2 yard gain turned into 6 or 7 because they were able to keep the pile moving and keep their legs going. And I thought that for sure stood out among those two guys. Now, can they maybe get a little bit of help and get to that second level without having to run through somebody and then maybe make a move and turn it into something even bigger? We've seen Dylan Jones do that when he got that chance against Purdue last year. We know he's got it in him. And we saw it obviously in practice a number of times as well. So can he get to that second level before getting hit? Just give him like 3 or 4 yards before he gets hit and let him have a chance to make a move and hit a seam for a big gain. I would anticipate that happening tomorrow. That's certainly a huge key. But the way it happens is if the offensive line is better than it was against Miami of Ohio. And we don't still know exactly what that is going to look like. However, because we have these, not just the picture now, but the video from Danny O'Neill's Wired on Wednesday, if you were to study that, and I'm one of the people that would study it, but I was also texted by our colleague, Colton Bartholomew, to point it out. Emerson Mandel with the first team at right tackle and Colin Cubberly with the first team at right guard. So that to go along with Emerson, with Riley Mallman at left tackle, it could have been just one play. It could have just been 2 plays. But I feel like we may see quite the shuffle there on Saturday, and that's essentially what Luke Fickell said. You were gonna see some moves, and those would certainly be some moves.
Very much so. Colin Cubberly was in that sort of next man up territory, and I wonder what this would. Let's say they go with a lineup like that. Is Kerry Kadenko not quite ready? Because I think if Kerry is full go, he's the next in line. But we saw Cubberly get reps with the top group at various stages, and they clearly need to be better. This is an opportunity for them to do that. When you're talking about Dylan Jones getting ahead of steam before he gets hit, I know that Wisconsin's had some amazing running backs, and there's a lot of advanced stats about yards after contact. But there were also a lot of times where guys were not getting touched for the first 3+ yards, and you're getting downhill. It makes all the difference in the world. So if this is the solution, ultimately, I look forward to seeing what they can do, because it was obvious after week 1 that something needed to change.
Yes, for sure. This also, if this group actually works, you think about the future of what that offensive line could be. If you're starting 2 redshirt freshmen in Colin Cubberly and Emerson Mandel, we know Kevin Haywood will be back next year and be the left tackle next year. You have Joe Brunner, who could, if he has a great season, could go. He could turn pro. And then you have the center spot, which you would assume at this point be Ryan Corey, but who knows? Again, this is down the line, but you think about the future of the line. a lot of young guys potentially getting playing time this year to grow together and then step in and maybe get back to being the dominant line that you want it to be. We haven't seen a ton of redshirt freshmen starting as a group in a while, and this would be. I'm not saying it's 2015 where you had 4 redshirt freshmen starting in that game against Minnesota where they ran for over 200 yards, and it kind of led to some of the successes the following year and the year after that as they got back to what they wanted to be along the offensive line. But this would be a good look at the future for sure if that's the line they go with.
It's exciting to think about. Let's say that is the combination. Look at your left side, man. You got your 3 leaders where you got Riley Joe, and then you've got Jake Renfro. I think they'd be wanting to run it to that side a lot, but obviously you've got to have confidence in the other side. And you're right. There's so much talent there with Emerson Mandel and Colin Cubberly that this is something that can get fans excited if it can be a turning point for the Badgers.
I guess my only concern here is, Emerson, ton of talent. Probably did not have the game that he wanted in week 1 at right guard. It felt like there may have been certainly more mental. There were some physical, but some mental mistakes. And I know obviously the one that stands out to me is him going one way and Joe Brunner going the other way and running into each other. But just then pushing him back out to right tackle and kind of a place where he played a ton of last year, but we didn't see him a ton there in fall camp. Mentally, is he comfortable just jumping right back into that? Probably is. I'm having spent as much time there last year as he did, but it's still just, I think, a little bit of a concern on my part, just flipping a young guy out there that quickly. But
that's fair. But if you're going to do it, this would be the game to try it.
Yes, I agree. I think all these moves are the game to try it, right? Given if Colin Cubberly's the guy at right guard, you're giving him his first start. You're giving Riley Mullman his first start at left tackle. And you're giving, Emerson Mandel his second start overall, but his first at right tackle. So this is the game to do it, but it's also some pretty significant moves if that's the way they end up going. What can we expect from a guy like Grant Steck, who it felt like he was kind of lost in the shuffle a little bit because you had Lance Mason, you had Tucker Ashcraft, and you have Jackson Aker. And now he's getting more opportunities. And that play that he made down the middle of the field against Miami, Ohio is not something that we have seen from him. Certainly haven't been given the chances, but that intrigues me. That one play intrigues me because I think we know I think he can be a very good inline blocker. I think he's big, he's strong. I think he's got all that, but the ability to get down the field, and we saw that in high school, but it's one thing to do it in high school and one thing to do it in college. And for him to react to that ball and come back to it and catch it and still take that hit and hold on, he's intriguing moving forward here because he may play for an extended period as Tucker Ashcraft comes back.
Very bright future. I thought physically he looked ready immediately. What did he come in at? Was it 255 or
big guy? Yeah.
260 something, like just insane. And when, again, we talked to him in the offseason, he mentioned he suffered some injuries and yet never missed a practice. Ultimate football tough guy. But that pass catching ability is what's going to separate him. And it's not like they're going to do that all the time. They still have Lance Mason, but yeah, that was a critical play, and it's a great ball by Danny, 22-yard pass down to the 3. If you can get a handful of those, it makes the offense much more dynamic. But sometimes when you get those opportunities, it's because of injury. Even Tucker Ashcraft in year 1. I mean, I didn't think he was going to be a factor, and then, of course, had a couple tight ends that ultimately weren't on the roster when you got there, and his role grew. Sometimes that's what it takes. But when you consider Jackson Aker and the versatility that he has and the number of snaps he's going to be lined up somewhere else at fullback, well, that's going to give someone like Grant a whole heck of a lot more opportunities. So I really like what he provides. And you're right. Sometimes you watch the high school film and it's that cliche of man among boys, and he was absolutely that. But doing it at this level is impressive this early in his career.
Yeah, it's intriguing. And again, don't want injuries, especially to a guy who Luke Fickell thought was one of the more improved guys from spring to fall in Tucker Ashcraft, but you have a ton of talented players that are young off these last 2 recruiting classes that are going to step up and maybe be given opportunities and maybe never let them go. Again, one game, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that, oh, Tucker Ashcraft's not going to get his job back when he gets healthy. But Grant Steck, I think, is going to make it, you would think, potentially make it difficult for the coaching staff just to plug Tucker back in or maybe rush him back because they need him so bad. You have a guy like Grant Steck that's going to be able to fill in that spot.
I would say this.
Go
I
ahead.
would say this just to expand on that a little bit more big picture. I was talking to Pat Lambert about this not too long ago for the story I wrote last week on the recruiting department. And one of the things he was talking about is, of course, we know the results these first 2 years haven't been what anybody wanted, but they are really leaning heavily on these last two recruiting classes, the two full recruiting cycles that this staff has had, because they feel like there's so much talent there and they just need to get them on the field. And I know a lot of staffs will say that and think that, but it's obvious when you just look at some of these guys who've been able to play early. If you get them on the field, then they can be the backbone and the future here. But you have to win while you do that, and that can be a challenge. But Steck fits right into that mold, just like Darian Dupree, Dylan Jones, and we can go on down the list.
Yeah, I was just about to say, you think about the guys that on offense, especially that are going to be playing on Saturday: Dylan Jones, Darian Dupree, Grant Steck. We'll see what happens with the line, but Colin Coverly and obviously Emerson Mandel. We know Kevin Haywood would be that guy, another member of a class of that class from 24 that was ready to play right away. And then you think about Eugene Hilton Jr., who in very limited opportunities last week looked the part. There is a lot of talent in that class. And then just flip over to the defensive side with Emilio Agard playing. We know potentially what they have in Mason Posa and Cooper Catalano. There are certainly some talented guys in these last two classes, and we're not even talking about a guy like Jalen Williams, who is buried at this point because what they needed to do in that defensive line room. But there's and Ernest Wilner or Willer for that matter as well. A lot of young guys that potentially could step up and have opportunities down the line, but we're seeing a lot of them play this year too.
Yep. Tommy Heiberger, Cairo Skanes, who's sort of in that next man up realm, but a lot of these guys got opportunities in practice. So I know it's been some down stretches, but if you want to have reason for optimism, it is with what they've been able to do. And obviously you got to keep them around, but it helps when you get them on the field.
Absolutely. Anything else you wanted to touch on game wise before we move on here? We'll get to our picks again in a little bit.
I think we're good.
All right. So we've talked about this a number of times. The changes coming to the transfer portal. I continue to think the transfer portal is the biggest thing that could potentially hurt college football or is hurting college football. We can talk about all the money and all the realignment and all that stuff. To me, it's the transfer portal and the ability to transfer whenever you want. I don't know that that's going to change, but the window is potentially changing. We've had two windows, right? We've had the one right after the end of the season when they announce the college football playoff, and that goes until late December, or did go to late December, early January. And if you played in the playoff, you had a few days after your game was done to get in. And then there was the spring portal. Well, it sounds like, according to Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports, the NCAA Football Oversight Committee is supporting a single transfer portal in January, and it would be a 10-day window that is expected to open January 2nd. That is a significant pushback from where it is right now. It's a much shorter period as well, and there's no spring portal. And also, grad transfers would be included in that as well, so they wouldn't be able to transfer until after the season either, whereas opposed to right now, they could transfer, I think, as early as October 1st. Does this do anything to help the chaos that happens at the end of the season leading into the playoff? We saw last year, like Bo Perbula leaving Penn State because he needed to find a place. Well, his team's still in the playoff, and he's a pretty important part of it, and he's moving on because the portal just the way that it works that way.
Those are the types of situations where you look at it and say, this makes sense. And I'm not an expert on the portal and this oversight committee. It's going to be chaos and insanity, whatever they do. But with this model, absurd the way I look at it. 10 days where you're having movement of, think about it, 30 guys on every team in some instances. And you can't tell me, and maybe this is the case already. Let's say you get eliminated and you don't go to a bowl game and it's November. I would anticipate rampant tampering. You've got the entire month of December. You think these guys are going to be sitting around continuing to work out at their school and not talking to anybody about what their future is when they know they're already gone? And again, maybe that's already been happening. I don't know. It feels incredibly condensed. And then you've got to turn around and enroll in school. Like, you got 10 days to do these visits. It just sounds like more time would be necessary. But
Well,
you go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just gonna say, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I liked having a second portal window, and I totally understand that in the NFL there's one window and that's it. But I like the idea of giving guys who are on the fence a chance to see what it looks like. And then if you're in a spot like Wisconsin was and you've got significant injuries, you can do some things. I also realize for the mid-level football programs, that's not ideal because you're going to plan. And then all of a sudden, if someone realizes they're in a better spot or they're looking around testing the market, that's not good for them. I think of like Dekel Crowdis, for example. He actually went in both times. And the first time around, I was talking to him about this. He's like, I didn't like what was presented. There weren't very many opportunities. I think he might have said Kansas was like the only major college football. And then you go in the spring portal window and you realize, oh, there's greater value for a wide receiver. And what does that mean for the program that you just stayed at and went through spring ball for a little bit with? But so I don't know what the answer is. I just think 10-day window in January is insane, but it makes it easier for coaches who already have to deal with so much stuff.
First of all, the question does a transfer portal exist?
It's an existential question. We learned maybe it doesn't.
Yeah,
for some people.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But so the 10-day window thing doesn't really bother me because it's not like you have to pick your school in that 10-day window, right? Like you don't have, like, if you just have to enter the portal in that 10-day window, you don't actually have to pick your school, just like you don't have to now. You can pick it whenever you want. The other aspect of this, and this is why I think the Xavier Lucas case is so important. You talked about rampant tampering. When do they sign those? Let's be fair. It's contracts, right? The rev share deals that they signed, that we know that Xavier Lucas signed. When do they sign those? Do they sign those in early December, like right after the season? And if so, that locks them in, right? And they can't then go later on and go into the portal unless they want to still have their rights, their NIL rights to have. So can tampering, and Luke Fickell said this, he doesn't think tampering can be fixed, which to an extent I would agree. But that's why I think this Xavier Lucas case is so important and potentially changes the landscape of it a little bit, because if people are going to be held to those deals, well, then it's going to be very hard for them to leave and go somewhere else, even with the tampering that would potentially be going on in that December window before the portal actually opens. So I think this case is significant on a number of levels, not simply just because it involves Wisconsin, but I don't have a problem with the one window. Again, player empowerment, all that stuff that we've been talking about, and I know the NBA had their whole thing, but it feels like college athletes can do whatever they want, and that's certainly nice in some respects, and I think they definitely should be getting paid, but there has to be some accountability. And we talk about the coaching staff, coaches being able to move whenever they want. Oh, why can't players move whenever they want? Well, coaches have to pay a buyout to get out and go somewhere else. If the player wants to pay off their rev share deal and go somewhere else, I think that should be allowed too. But I don't see a lot of players doing that. So the ability to move whenever and wherever you want on a regular basis, and the whole AJ Storr play at 4 schools in 4 years, or I think TJ Finley's on his 7th school, like that's insane. And just is not good for college football and not good for college athletics. That has to be reined in some way, because I think that more than anything is not killing, but damaging people's love for for college football because it's turned into the NFL to an extent. Now that said, the ratings also have turned into the NFL based on what we saw last week in Texas and Ohio State, the most watched football game ever, or like up there opener ever. College football is still in a very good place. I just think the transfer portal just is killing it slowly or hurting it slowly.
I mean, on the buyout thing, I feel like the next school ends up paying it for the coach anyway, which you're probably not going to get at the player level, but that's irrelevant. I mean, from the signing of the contract situation is certainly interesting, and it depends on when your season ends. And we know Wisconsin's ended in November, and the next weekend or early in the next week, they had players signing these deals in early December. And so what will that look like moving forward? Now, that was also at a point where the revenue sharing wasn't in place, so there were memorandums of understanding, and now you kind of have a better sense of what you're going to be able to offer. But yeah, especially for those teams who are not in bowl contention or maybe play an earlier bowl game, ultimately I think what it should do is it gives players and the teams time to really assess what they want. Because if you're going to say, I'm not going to sign any type of arrangement, then you're making it clear where you're headed.
Yep.
And that isn't the worst thing in the world. So I'll be really intrigued to see ultimately what this looks like. What I do know is that 10-day window is going to be absolutely insane from a coverage of college football standpoint, which isn't the worst thing in the world, because somehow the offseason has at times become more exciting than the regular season.
Well, yeah, because you have hope. Right? You have
despair. Oh, look at all these guys leaving. What does this mean for the program? And then, oh, this guy's going to turn it around. So we know the transfer portal is here to stay. It just depends on what it looks like. It's free agency, but you're right. You do need some structure here, which is what everybody's been talking about for the last couple of years. The scale has tipped so far in the other direction that like everybody is trying to keep pace and their heads are spinning. And so if this helps provide some regulation, then great.
Yeah. Again, you are right about just because you're pushing it back to January 2nd doesn't mean there's going to be people not knowing exactly what's happening at the end of their season and what they're going to do. But again, I guess we'll see how it plays out and how this all affects it. At the end of it, way down the line, and I'm not smart enough to know exactly how it would all work, but like collective bargaining feels like the best way to go, where you get everybody in a room and you figure it out. But I feel like you may have to say they're employees to collectively bargain. And I don't know that any in college football or anybody in college athletics is ready to do that just yet, but maybe that is down the line exactly what it's going to have to be. We'll see. Again, not smart enough. So if I said that and that doesn't make any sense, don't hold me to it. All right, moving on here. Few odds and ends before we get to our picks. Yesterday, On3 came out with their who's winning the college football recruiting spending battle, the 2024 college football recruiting budgets. And whenever this comes out, I think it's the most ridiculous thing ever, because everyone accounts their recruiting budgets differently. And so when I see Minnesota spending more money than Michigan and Ohio State on recruiting, it makes you be like, I don't know that this list is necessarily totally, I mean, guys, it's honest to an extent, but I don't know that it's really worthwhile, if I'm being completely honest. We touched about it a little bit last night. Wisconsin came in 36th at I think it was $1.3 million that they spent in 2024 on recruiting, which I think we both know is a number that is way too low, way too small than what they actually probably spend. But again, it's all about how different places account for their recruiting budgets. And I just don't buy for a second that the likes of Ohio State and Michigan are not in the top 10 and how much money they spend on recruiting.
This to me is, while a fun talking point and something that riles everybody up because it applies to every fan base in college football, at least at some of these major programs, it is the biggest nothing burger of a story I could imagine, because there are a number of reasons. Yes, all these schools account for things differently. And this is specifically high school recruiting, correct?
Correct.
Recruiting budgets. And what does that mean? And I go back to, okay, so if we're talking about data from 2024, I wrote that story, which is now about a year and a half ago, but it was looking at that first recruiting class, the first summer. and I got all the information from Wisconsin through an open records request. And on the first 2 weekends of official visit season, so that was the first 2 weeks of June, I had reported Wisconsin spent $319,000 on all that. And like, I think that's a lot of money. And that brought in a lot of people. You're talking about flights for the kids, flights for the parents or the guardians of whoever is coming with them. The meals were significant, the entertainment, all that stuff. And it was tremendously successful. Like, I have so many thoughts running through my head. Did Wisconsin need to spend $2 million? It was $319,000 sufficient to ultimately get what was the backbone of that class, which, as we just said, is going to be so important to the future. Kevin Haywood was one of those guys who committed on that trip. And like, let's say you're Wisconsin and where you're recruiting from and where they continue to talk about where they want to recruit the Midwest. Okay. You want to go into the Chicago lane. You want to get the Wisconsin kids. And that's not to say they're not national, but you also have to factor that kind of stuff into the equation. Ohio has so much talent. Ohio State can go anywhere, but they're getting a lot of kids from Ohio. I just think it's kind of an apples to oranges situation. If you're recruiting people and you've got an area that's close to your school, well, that's going to cost less money. And again, how all these schools account for it is different. So I don't know. I mean, like if someone said, well, Wisconsin ranks 36th, I'd probably say, well, that sounds about right. I mean, when you consider how much other schools are willing to spend, ultimately it's what do you do with the ability to recruit and develop relationships, and what kind of talent are you getting and how do you develop them over time? And you also have this other element of transfer portal, which is not factored into this, which is like a major percentage of your roster, 20 plus guys, most of whom are going to end up playing right away because they've already been a multi-year player in college. So I just think this is one of the bigger non-stories I can think of.
Yeah. Again, these numbers are from public records show who spent the most in the fiscal year 2024 when it came to hotel rooms, airfare, and other luxuries.
Yeah. So that's just bringing guys to campus, right? It's not getting on a jet and going to California to recruit a guy.
See, but I don't know.
Even know what's included.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like in Wisconsin's case, the plane that they use to fly all over the place, is that included in here? Or is that something that's donated and not necessarily written down as an expense? I don't know the answer to that question, but again, I just don't believe for a second that a program that recruits nationally like Ohio State and Michigan, I know you said they get a lot of talent from around their place, but when they recruit nationally like they do, that they're spending less than Minnesota. I just don't buy that. So again,
and the last thing I would just say on this is if it's merely accounting for how much you're spending coming in, like I think Wisconsin does a damn good job of selling the program in June. And they don't always get every player that they want. We've talked about it from this last class. They brought in some high-end 4-star talent and those guys committed elsewhere. But I do think you end up getting the bulk of your guys because you've developed relationships with them. You bring them there and they've gotten some pretty good players. I think they sell this place about as well as you can sell any place. So do you have to spend X million dollars to do that? No. But the proof is in the pudding. Do you win games? And ultimately, that's all that matters.
Absolutely. All right. Ready to jump into our picks here?
Let's do it. I've studied all 14 teams extensively.
All right. Good.
Look at those records, Zach. I thought I was going to go 0-7.
And we both went 3-4. Yeah, not too bad. I of course got Wisconsin right, but otherwise forgettable. The Alabama game, not ideal for either of us. I picked Notre Dame, and they almost covered. But you picked Miami. We had some differing things. This slate, not nearly as good as the opening slate in terms of games that you like to pick. Also, Illinois, yes, covered as 45-point favorites. So that was good. But yes, let's jump into the second week of picks here. Western Illinois, that team that was unable to cover unable to do anything against Illinois, is now at Northwestern this week. And Northwestern 28-point favorites, slightly less favored than Illinois last week.
Well, let me say this. If we need a tiebreaker at some point, I feel like the Wisconsin game should be like the final 3-pointer on the rack during the 3-point contest where it's worth like 2 points. But we can talk about that at some point later.
1-0. I got one. I'm 1-0 there.
Okay. This is such a tough one because Northwestern sucked in week 1. They went to Tulane and lost 23-3. And yet Western Illinois Can you say they were worse? I mean, they lost 52-3, but at least it was against a top 12 team. Does Northwestern have an offense where they can score 28 points? I guess I will reluctantly pick the Wildcats to cover because it's the lesser of two evils.
Did you see what Northwestern did last week, though? Like Tulane wanted to honor their team from the 20 years ago when Katrina hit, right? And they wanted to wear the same white uniforms that they wore their first game back from Katrina. And Northwestern said no, because it had been decided months in advance that they were going to be wearing their whites, as if, again, maybe it was a late ask. I don't know. But if I'm Northwestern, I'm doing whatever I can to make that work out. What's the difference, right? Like what dark jerseys versus light jerseys? Like maybe it's an equipment thing that I'm not necessarily capable of answering, but it feels like a small thing that they could have done, even though it would have been a little bit more on their plate to take care of it. But Preston Stone, who was at SMU last year, 4 interceptions. Not good in week 1 against Tulane. I'm going to take Northwestern here to cover. 28 points is a lot, but Western Illinois was horrible. So, all right, Illinois on the road. Illinois is ranked, I believe, 12th. No, what were they? Didn't put it on the graphic right, but either way, they are at Duke, and Illinois is a 2.5-point favorite.
That's a tough one. Luke Altmaier did throw 3 touchdowns last week against a Pee Wee League team, but I think Illinois is
11th. That was it.
As good as advertised, and they'll go in there and cover. But like Duke, you kind of forget about Duke and like Manny Diaz going over there and them playing really well. They've been playing well for a long time. They just get overshadowed because there are a lot of other teams that get more attention. But I think that this Illini team has the goods and is going to go in there and cover.
So it's the spread is low considering how good Illinois is, but one of the key ads this offseason among the quarterbacks was Darian Mensah going to Duke after spending last year at Tulane, where he threw 22 touchdowns and had 6 interceptions. Had a very nice debut against Elon, 389 yards, 3 touchdowns. I'm going to take Duke. I'm going to take Duke in this one. Bielema on the road in September, probably pretty good. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I have no idea otherwise, but I'm gonna take Duke there. So Iowa and Iowa State. Iowa going on the road. Mark Gronkowski, a very tough debut for him at quarterback for Iowa. They all thought he was going to be the savior at Iowa. Did not look like it last week. We'll see this week. Iowa State ranked 16th, and they are favored by 3.5.
Iowa had a classic box score, Iowa style. They beat Albany 34-7. They ran the ball 53 times and they passed it 16 times. I think Gronkowski passed it like 15 times or something like that. I'm going to say Iowa State has more firepower. I know Iowa's defense generally keeps them in it, but this is a huge rivalry, and I think the home team has a big advantage. I'm picking the Cyclones to cover at home.
It feels like this game's always close.
Yes.
It feels like it comes down to like a field goal or something like that. And it probably doesn't, but it just feels like it because these programs are so close. I'm going to take Iowa State as well, 3.5. They've won their first 2. Obviously, went over and beat Kansas State in Ireland, and then came home and smacked somebody. It was like 55-7, I think it was. Either way, I'm going to take Iowa State as well. Oklahoma State traveling to Oregon, take on the 6th-ranked Ducks, who looked very good last week. The Ducks 28.5-point favorites in this one. It's a big number.
That is a big number in a Power 4 matchup, but I'm just going to go Oregon. Tough place to play. We'll get to find out how tough it is here later in the season. Ducks roll.
Bit of a struggle last week for Oklahoma State against UT Martin, but I am also but that is a big number for sure. The way that Oregon played, especially offensively, the way that they just seamlessly throw a new quarterback in there and he looks just as good as the other one, I'm going to take Oregon as well. UCLA, who looked like dog shit. Excuse me. UCLA at UNLV. That is wrong. I believe UCLA is favored by 2.5, but at UNLV, what?
This changes everything. So UCLA's favored.
Well, hold up a second. Let me check to make this. This is what I get for
right.
doing it this morning.
I can ramble while you look it up.
After having perhaps a drink or two last night. UNLV is the underdog here. UCLA favored by 2.5.
Okay. See, when I saw UNLV was favored by 2.5, I didn't blink because UCLA got hammered against Utah 43-10 at the Rose Bowl. I know UNLV hasn't been the most impressive team. They're coming off that victory against Sam Houston, which we all know is quarterbacked by Maber Matire. I know you shared the interception. He did throw a touchdown pass. Not the worst line for a quarterback, but I digress.
I'm told that he did a really good job after that interception where he ran across the line of scrimmage. He was past the line of scrimmage by 3 or 4 yards, threw it, got picked, taken back for a touchdown. I'm told that he did really well after that. I don't really particularly care how he did. I was just sharing a play of a former Badgers quarterback. I didn't see any of the other plays. That was the only one I saw online, so I shared it. It was not intended to make it our point from last year as to why he was not playing over Braden Locke. That was not the point of posting that, but some people took it as such. So
I'm going UNLV. I don't trust UCLA right now. They are the worst. Well, it's a toss-up. Who's the worst team in the Big Ten? Northwestern, UCLA. Northwestern, that was pretty bad. But
you know who wasn't bad last week, and was again poor competition, but Purdue looked pretty good.
Yes.
So
UNLV, that's where I'm going.
You're going to take UNLV, even though that number is wrong.
Well, that's even better for me.
Is Nico? I mean, that was a really poor performance from him. I'm going to take. I'm going to take UNLV as well. I don't like either one of them. Michigan going on the road to take on Oklahoma. Michigan ranked 15th in the country, taking on the 18th ranked team in the country, and Oklahoma a 5.5-point favorite there.
Very interesting game. This is the first road game for Bryce Underwood. I thought his debuts go pretty good. 251 yards. Might not have been a blowout win for Michigan, but with 5.5 points to play with, I know it's on the road. I will take Michigan, even if Oklahoma wins by 3.
Yeah, so the thing I liked about Oklahoma was they got the quarterback, right? They got John Mateer, and he looked pretty darn good in his first outing. I think it being the first game for Underwood on the road, dude's a big-time player and an absolute problem in the Big Ten, and he's going to be really, really good. But I'm going to take Oklahoma at home. Favored by 5.5 there. And in the matchup of the week, as usual, Middle Tennessee State coming to Wisconsin, the Badgers 28.5-point favorites.
Big number. Not sure how good I feel about this, but since I already made my prediction for the story on Badger Connect, I'm going to say that Wisconsin covers. I think defensively, Wisconsin will dominate. And the hiccup here, or the thing that's holding me back, is what's this offensive line look like and what's Danny O'Neal going to do out there? But I just think they are clearly the better team, and you can hand the ball off and you should be able to dominate. So I say Wisconsin covers.
I'm going to say Wisconsin does not cover. I have not made a actual score prediction other than on the air. So I'll say here 28-0 is what I'm going with.
Yeah, that's fair. I went 38-7.
Yeah. So that's what I'm going to roll with. I'm going to say Wisconsin does dominate defensively and they get enough done offensively. Before I guess we didn't even talk about this when we were talking about the quarterbacks. Where is your comfort level with Hunter Simmons being the next guy in?
Okay for this game. But that's where they're at right now. I mean, if you're looking at who the number 3 quarterback is, you're in a better spot than you have been previously because he's at least got a little bit of experience and for a little bit was pushing Danny, or at least they were competitive for that number 2 spot. So all things considered, if you had to go to a number 3, decent spot for one game.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see how it goes. Wisconsin and Middle Tennessee State coming up at 3:00 on Saturday at Camp Randall. We'll be there. We'll talk about it on Sunday into Monday, and we'll see you guys then. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right. There he is. Jesse Temple from Badger Connect. You've been listening to The Camp.